Wednesday, September 17th, 4:52 in the afternoon. I remember the exact minute because I was watching the clock on my dashboard when my phone rang. My in-laws' flight had pushed back twice that morning, and I was tired in that quiet, bone-deep way you get after smiling at an airport for 6 hours. I had no idea that in the next 4 minutes, everything I thought I knew about my own house would come apart. I'm going to tell you what I found on those cameras, and I'm going to tell you what I did about it, because I didn't yell, and I didn't break anything, and by the end, I didn't need to. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. If you're watching this from your car, your kitchen, your break room, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from tonight. If you believe loyalty should be rewarded and quiet betrayal should never win, hit that like button before we start. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who Rosa Delgado was before you'll understand why her voice shaking on that phone meant the whole world to me. Rosa had worked for our family for 10 years. She started the same month my daughter Emily was born, back when we lived in a 2-bedroom rental on Larkspur Court in Aurora, Colorado. She wasn't just someone who mopped floors. She was the one who noticed Emily's fever before the pediatrician's office opened, who drove 20 minutes out of her way every Friday to bring my mother-in-law's favorite tamales when she was recovering from hip surgery, who never once in 10 years took a sick day she didn't actually need. She kept a little spiral notebook in her apron pocket where she wrote down which cabinet Emily's peanut allergy medication lived in case she was ever the only one home. Nobody asked her to do that. She just did. She used to leave a folded dish towel on the stove handle, always the same way, corner tucked under corner. It was such a small thing. I didn't understand until later how much that small steady habit would end up mattering to me. My name is Nathan Reeves. I'm 46. I run a mid-sized commercial insulation company out of Denver, the kind of business that doesn't make headlines, but pays for braces and family vacations, and eventually my in-laws' round-trip tickets to visit for 2 weeks every September. My flaw, and I'll say it plainly because there's no use pretending otherwise, is that I trust people the way you trust gravity, automatically, without checking. I sign things without reading every line. I handed my business partner login credentials I should have kept to myself. I figured if someone said they loved you, that was the end of the investigation, not the beginning of one. That clears throat Wednesday. I had just dropped my wife's parents at Denver International after their visit. My wife, Kimberly, had stayed home. She said her back was bothering her, and the walking would be too much. I didn't question it. I never questioned much. I was on Pina Boulevard doing 61 in a 65 when Rosa called. Her voice wasn't its normal steady self. It had a crack running straight through the middle of it. "Mr. Reeves," she said, "don't go home yet. Please, check your cameras first." I asked her what was wrong. She wouldn't say. She just said, "Please, check the cameras," and then she said she had to go, and the line went dead. I pulled into a gas station on East 56th Avenue, hands not quite steady, and opened the security app on my phone. We'd installed the cameras 2 years earlier after a string of car break-ins in the neighborhood. I'd forgotten they were even still running most days. The living room camera showed my brother-in-law's no. I need to say this the way it actually happened. It wasn't my brother-in-law. It was Derek Holloway, my closest friend since our sophomore year at Colorado State. The man who stood up at my wedding and read a poem he wrote himself about loyalty lasting longer than good weather. Derek was sitting at my kitchen table. Kimberly was across from him, and spread across the table between them were documents, printed pages, a folder, my folder, the navy blue one I kept our business insurance and property deed copies in, locked in a drawer in my home office. I turned the volume up. The audio was thin, but I heard enough. I heard Derek say the word signature twice. I heard Kimberly laugh, not a warm laugh, but a short, flat one, and say, "He won't even notice until it's already done." I sat in that gas station parking lot for 11 minutes without moving. A man in a Ford pickup pulled up next to me for gas, filled his tank, and left. I didn't notice him arrive or leave. I was watching my wife's hand rest on the back of Derek's, right there on my kitchen table, next to a stack of paper with my name printed on it in places I hadn't put it there myself. I wanted to be honest about something. I didn't explode. I didn't drive home and throw the door open. Something in me went very still, the way a lake goes still right before a storm, not after one. I called Rosa back. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been holding the phone in her hand. "How long has this been going on?" I asked her. "I don't know for certain, Mr. Reeves," she said. I asked her why she'd risk her job to tell me this. She went quiet for a second, and then she said something I've thought about every day since, "Because you paid me on time every single month for 10 years. Even the month your father passed, and you forgot almost everything else. Somebody in this house should be honest with you." I didn't go home that night. I told Kimberly by text that I was staying at a hotel near the airport because I was too wiped out to drive further. Which wasn't a lie exactly, just not the whole truth. I checked into a Hampton Inn on Tower Road, sat on the edge of the bed, and read through everything Rosa had written in that little spiral notebook, transcribed onto a fresh page and photographed for me. Dates, times, a mention of a document she'd overheard called a quitclaim, a mention of moving 40% of my company's ownership stake into something called a holding trust before. In Derek's words, he gets any smarter about it. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't confront them that night. I didn't call a lawyer screaming. I sat with it. No, I let myself feel exactly how much it hurt. Because pretending it didn't would have made me stupid twice, once for missing it, and once for rushing past it. Thursday, September 18th, 9:14 in the morning, I called my attorney, a woman named Carol Whitfield who'd handled my business contracts for 6 years. I told her what I'd seen. She was quiet for a moment, and then she asked me one question that changed the shape of everything. Nathan, whose name is actually on the deed to Larkspur, and whose name is on the majority ownership of Reeves Insulation? Mine, only mine. Kimberly had never been added to either, something I'd meant to fix for years out of what I thought was fairness, and never got around to. That morning, I understood, for maybe the first time, that my own procrastination had accidentally protected me. I didn't feel like celebrating that. I felt sick, because it meant the paperwork on my kitchen table wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was forgery in progress. Somebody had been drafting documents designed to look like my signature. I spent the next 9 days living like a man watching a storm build on the horizon, counting the distance between the lightning and the thunder. I didn't tell Kimberly I knew anything. I kept coming home like normal. I kissed her on the cheek like normal. I watched her hide her phone screen when I walked into the kitchen, something I used to explain away and now saw with different eyes. Derek stopped by twice that week, both times when I was still at the office. Except I wasn't. I was parked 2 streets over in my truck, watching his car pull into my driveway on the camera feed. Carol worked fast and quiet. On day 4, she confirmed the notary stamp on one of the draft documents belonged to an office that had, 6 months earlier, had its license suspended for exactly this kind of thing. On day 6, she found a second holding account opened under Kimberly's maiden name with 3 small transfers already sitting in it. Nothing enormous yet, just enough to make it look on paper like an account that had existed for years. On day 7, I moved quietly. I met with Carol and restructured the ownership of Reeves Insulation into a family trust, but not the family Kimberly and Derek were expecting. I named my daughter Emily as primary beneficiary with a clean, ironclad clause locking out any transfer without her direct consent once she turned 25, which was 3 years off, managed in the meantime by Carol as trustee. I sold the Larkspur property outright to a buyer Carol found through a colleague at fair market value, and used part of the proceeds to set up something I'd been meaning to do for years and never had. A standing account, fully funded, in Rosa Delgado's name, along with a letter making clear that whatever happened to my marriage, her job and her home security were never going to depend on it again. I didn't do any of it to punish Kimberly directly. I did it because I finally understood that what was mine needed to belong, on paper, to people who'd actually earned it. The missed calls started on day 8. Kimberly noticed the Larkspur listing had gone up under a different name. 11 missed calls that afternoon. By evening, 29. Derek called, too, twice, though I didn't recognize the third number until Carol told me he'd started using his mother's old cell phone to try to reach me. By the next morning, 38 missed calls between the two of them. She had no idea yet how much I'd already moved, but she was about to. Friday, September 26th, 7:20 in the evening. I finally answered. I told her to come to the house alone. She did. Derek's car wasn't in the driveway that time. She walked in already talking, already building a story about how I was overreacting, about how the folder on the table had nothing to do with what I thought it did. I set the printed bank records on the counter, then the notary suspension letter, then the trust documents with Emily's name on them, already filed, already final. I didn't raise my voice once through any of it. My voice didn't rise, I told her. It didn't need to. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the trust paperwork. Her face did something I'd never seen it do before. Not anger. Not exactly. More like watching a building's foundation give out from underneath it while the roof was still trying to hold its shape. You had no right, she said. I had every right, I said. It's my name on all of it. It always was. She asked, quieter now, if there was any way back from this. I told her the honest truth. I told her I wasn't interested in punishing her forever, but I also wasn't interested in pretending the last 9 days hadn't happened. The house would be sold. The business was protected in a way neither she nor Derek could touch. Whatever she and Derek decided to do next, they'd be doing it without access to anything that used to be mine. She left that night. I heard later, through people who still talked to both of us, that Derek's own business took a hit not long after. Turns out forged documents draw exactly the kind of attention you don't want, even when the intended victim decides not to press charges out of what was left of 10 years of friendship. I didn't lift a finger to make that happen. I didn't need to. I still live in Denver, in a smaller place now, closer to Emily's school. Rosa still works for me twice a week, though these days it feels less like an employer and employee, and more like two people who trust each other completely, which is rarer than it should be. She still folds the dish towel the same way, corner tucked under corner, and every time I see it, I think about the phone call that started all of this. I'm not going to tell you I've forgiven everything. I haven't, and I'm not in a hurry to. What I will tell you is that I stopped needing anything from Kimberly or Derek to feel like my life was mine again. That happened the day I signed Emily's name onto that trust, not the day either of them apologized, because neither of them ever really did. If there's one thing I'd want you to take from this, it's that loyalty rarely announces itself with fireworks. Sometimes it's a woman with a spiral notebook in her apron pocket, willing to risk her own job to tell you the truth. Pay attention to the people who show up quietly and consistently long before you ever need them to.